Hi, listeners and viewers out there. The British Business Podcast is delighted to welcome Tarun Ghulati, serial entrepreneur, been a banker all of his life, but he has many, many other areas to talk about today. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce you and a warm welcome. Thank you.
Thank you so much for having me here
Thank
today.
you. Can you give us a little bit of background in your journey and how you came into the areas of the businesses that you came into?
I started in India with a company called Xerox, and I launched Xerox in India and built it to a decent brand, and everybody called. When you saw a photocopy, you saw it was a Xerox. And then I went on to Philips in the lighting division. I was the only non-engineer selected to that division. So I lit up entire cities like London, or I would say entire a country like, because I was responsible for Northern India, which is the size of the UK. So if you can imagine lighting up an entire sort of city like this, street lighting and everything else, so that was tremendous. And
Wow.
then I got into banking, which was pretty sexy those days. So I got into Citibank. I walked into the HR guy's office and said, look, I want to join your bank. And he liked the approach. And there I was running lending products, which basically meant you give out millions and millions. And when things went a little sour, they said, now you head up collections. So these 10 cars that would land up outside the airport when I would land lending out money, none of those were visible when I was collecting the money. And that was for about 5 years until I got selected headhunted by HSBC. So I went into their financial institutions group, which is part of the investment bank. I ran that for Eastern India, Bangladesh, and Nepal. And then I was the corporate banking operations head, where you were responsible for keeping the corporate banking guys on the straight and narrow, audits and regulations and everything else, making sure we got the money back. And then I was head of the retail bank for North India, which is, as I said earlier, the size of the UK, all the lending and everything else. And then HSBC at that time had bought Midland Bank, as you may recall.
Yes.
And it's the only bank in the world till today that maintains a core group of international global leaders, those days called international officers, now international managers. They never number more than about 300. You're meant to be good and the best, and you sort of pick up your satchel, you get parachuted into countries where they want to bring about change. You bring about the change quickly, transform businesses, and then it's the next thing for you. For your sins, the company takes care of everything. So you're not saddled with the usual sort of hassles that most people have when they move from country to country, but you're supposed to get the job done. So I was first sent into Hong Kong. This was before the handover. So I was in Hong Kong before and after the handover. I ran credit and risk for 14 countries across Asia Pacific, which meant one day it could be aircraft financing, another day it could be a securitized deal for Tokyo Disneyland. So you name it, a few $100 million every time.
And when you say credit risk, that obviously it's about the credit, the individual businesses who are wanting to take that money to invest in their businesses to grow.
That's right. So
the risk part, I think a lot of our business viewers and listeners today, the risk part, what are you managing there? What for the bank?
So to give you a little perspective, these proposals will come from countries. So when I said 14 different countries,
wow.
It could be New Zealand, it could be in Australia, it could be any other country in Asia Pacific, primarily Japan. I looked at Japan also. These would number, I said, a couple of $100 million. If it was a renewal of a facility, say a Mitsubishi or whatever, it could run into 500, 600 million at any time. When those proposals came, like any other relationship manager sitting in a country, the desire is to push that credit forward. Your role would be to make sure it's stacked up. The bank is lending money ultimately, and you make sure the money comes back. So policies are adhered to. You make sure from a risk and reward perspective, it stood on its own. And so you'd see all sorts of things. I remember getting a proposal for buying forest concessions in Zaire, let's say, for example. And the guns were still stuttering around in that part of the world at that time. And you didn't want to give money there. So you'd find countries proposing, Malaysia, for instance, had sent that credit, I think. So you'll see things happening. So you keep things, your bank is there to take risks. but it's not there to lose the money.
Sure.
It's held in trust for other people who are depositors and other things.
Incredible.
So I did that, and then I was responsible for 15 countries as credit. First, this was Credit Manager International. Then I was made Operations Manager International for HSBC, again in Hong Kong, where I was responsible for 15 countries for their operations, which meant the area operating plans for these countries were finalized. If there was any new initiative that they were trying to launch, so for instance, I recall, for instance, opening up in a rep office, let's say in Kazakhstan or any country, opening up new offices, say New Zealand wanted to open new branches, or say a Bangladesh wanted to open retail banking. Do they have the footfall? Do they have the wherewithal to launch a product? So you saw all that, and you ensured that, for instance, I also revamped at that time the private banking business for the Asian diaspora business globally. I was also responsible for the 33 billion merger between Marine Midland Bank and HSBC in the US. So you did all that, and these were approved by obviously the ALCO committees of the bank, the Asset and Liability Committee of the head offices. And then I went on to Thailand as the Senior Vice President responsible for business development for the bank. That was fascinating and fantastic. Thailand is a great place. So I sort of enjoyed myself there, got back into riding a horse and doing several things there, which was exciting, honed my golfing skills. And then I went on to Qatar as the number 2 there. So obviously did tremendous work there. We made more money than the combined HSBC businesses, particularly in the personal and wealth space for HSBC in the region. So that was all due to the team. And obviously the productivity per staff was the highest, cost income ratio was the lowest, and indeed if you can sort of walk the talk and sort of take the team along with you, anything can happen. I set up a sales team which was predominantly made up of females. For the first time in Qatar, people saw people knocking on doors. These were mainly ladies from Jordan, Lebanon, who were happy to go out and extol the virtues of the products and the propositions. And then I appointed the first female branch manager there and all that. So that was fascinating. Qatar was not what it is today. I know it's hosting the World Cup soon, sure. but it was exciting again. And then I came to the UK, where I ran.
How long ago?
This is going back to about 2002. So it's close to about 20 years. And I ran our set of branches across the Northwest, so Southall and Ealing and that neck of the woods, okay. Where people still sort of wanted to have their, you wanted to stand in a queue and sort of get your passbook and everything stamped. That was fascinating. But then the demographics have changed subsequently. I remember celebrating the 100 years of the bank there, and a good old friend of mine, Lord Noon, if I might mention him, who's no more, was there, and several others there were several people who attended who were over 100 years old. And they told me a story which is fascinating. They were carrying a wad of notes, and there was a gust of wind and the money flew across. 8-10 people scurried across to collect the money and handed it back to the individual. Would it happen today is the question. So those were different days, different times. We were not having the cost of living crises that we're having today. And then I was called by the group CEO of the bank to head up a $40 billion Premier Bank. So the HSBC Premier proposition, I led that and was making close to $1 billion odd for the bank. We had about 1,600 branches those days across the UK. These branches were led by 8 directors. And then these Premier managers, relationship managers sat there, and you sort of dovetail the wealth proposition with the relationship proposition to give our Premier banking customers what they deserved. I was also simultaneously made head of the International Personal Bank, which basically meant you have customers who say live in the UK, but want to sort of do something else in other countries, say Hong Kong. Sure. How do you make sure that they can hit the ground running there? Their basic banking needs are satisfied. So sort of dovetailing that effort again. So I was heading that, which also meant I had a global remit in terms of the customer relationship aspects to make sure policies and the vision of the bank was sort of transparent, and it was seamless across these various markets. And then my children are going into boarding schools because over all these travels, you wanted to call someplace home. So I thought, let's stay back here. And they were shooting me off to Armenia as chief executive of the bank. And I said, look, I got to stay back here. They said, you've got to become a local staff. And I said, well, at that time I thought, why would I do that? So I stayed back. And in life, you sort of, whilst you're driving a car, you sort of keep looking ahead. You look at the rear view mirror once in a while, but you keep your focus. So whilst it was a big, bold decision to leave perhaps one of the finest and the best paying sort of jobs in banking and high profile, I left that. I went to ING to sort of help out with the private banking business in this part of the world, including India and the sort of Asian diaspora.
Did it mean a move away? Did you
No, I stayed in the UK.
You stayed here?
Stayed here.
So just a move.
I also helped a headhunting firm, which has a global sort of Sheffield Harvard. I helped set up their global retail banking and commercial banking practice. And then I was approached by a headhunter from India, India's largest and oldest asset management company called UTI, was looking for a chief executive to sit here, but sort of look after the businesses globally. And we had country managers sitting in Bahrain, Dubai, Singapore, Mauritius. So I got selected after 6 months of rigorous sort of assessment. And there I was the CEO of that business, which meant flying into different markets. And we also ran the oldest India fund globally within that fund. So it was mainly retail customers. But this was during the pandemic, the financial crises, 2008, 2009. Even then, I raised about 700 odd million sterling from different markets, which was pretty fascinating given that money was very tight. Then I went off to Mauritius as the group president and CEO of an entity, the largest entity on the island, which meant I sat, before that for UTI, I'd already sat on about 14 odd boards, which meant sitting on about 20 odd boards. Deputy chairman of a listed bank, which I took to the listing there. The CEOs of these entities reported to me of the largest insurance company, sort of one of the largest and fastest moving banks, and asset management entity and all that, which also meant I sat on several boards in Kenya, Mauritius, Botswana. So I've sat on over 35 plus boards to date. And so it's been an exciting journey. And then I was there for about close to 3 years in Mauritius, built a very robust business. There were about 2,000 odd people reporting into that business. And it's all about teamwork. It's all about people. People bring in businesses. You sell to people. It's how you get along with people. So I believe that's for anybody to succeed, you've got to don't carry a chip on your shoulder if you want to succeed. It's people who you interact with, and be humble and sort of lead from the front, roll up your sleeves when you need to. So I came back here. I thought I'll start an entrepreneurial journey.
How long ago was that?
That was about 6-7 years ago.
Okay.
And I, over the years, have sat on the London Chamber of Commerce and Industry. So I was a deputy chairman of the Asian Business Association, still the longest serving member. And so that was a good thing to start with. So I set up a couple of things. One, an entity called Squared Watermelon Limited,
okay,
which excites people with the name.
It's very exciting.
And that basically meant that I still wanted to be in financial services. So we tied up and got FCA authorization as an appointed representative.
Can you just say the name again?
Squared Watermelon Limited.
And if people wanted to find that on the internet?
Just www.squaredwatermelon.com.
Fantastic.
Square Watermelon, just for your benefit, is a fruit. Watermelon is round, unwieldy. When you sort of cut it open, difficult to store, and sort of bounces all over.
Difficult.
The Japanese sort of grow this in a sort of square cuboid glass sort of box. It costs a ton of money, 400 to 500. One of the costliest fruits, probably exotic fruits in the world, and they sell it like that. More maybe decoration, but it's edible, I believe. And so that's how the name started. So basically, we were arranging money for SMEs primarily through about 150 lenders. Now, banking is disintermediated. No bank is doing everything. So there are different entities today who may be lending monies for invoice financing, for bridging loans, secured, unsecured, all sorts of stuff. And so we went to about 150 lenders, and you can name them. They were the top sort of lenders and some lesser known who are experts at what they do. And we helped a lot of SMEs get monies when they needed it. But obviously with the pandemic coming across, this business slowed down because the face-to-face interaction, which is the moment of truth, was no longer possible. So we sort of closed that down and do a few things in that business. But one of the things we had started simultaneously, which has actually become a global brand, is the 21st Century Icon Awards. Now, these awards are for the next generation of global leaders, primarily 50 and below. And the winners have come to date from 37 different countries. So people don't come in from Birmingham to Manchester or London somewhere. These guys have flown in to attend these awards. Top panel of judges, member from the House of Lords, the vice chair of KPMG, the CEO of the Dino Awards, which, as you know, the Princes William and their Royal Highnesses are patrons, including the Prime Minister. So they're top panel of judges, top partners. It's been going for 5 years.
And how do people get to see or hear about that particular? Is there a website for that?
There's certainly a very fantastic website. So they can go to www.21st21st-centuryiconawards.com. And these awards have been going for 5 years. First year, they were held at the Intercontinental London Park Lane. The next year, the Jumeirah Carlton in Knightsbridge. Then at the Rosewood. And then the fourth year, we had the pandemic. So it was more of an online. And last year at the House of Lords.
Wow.
And this year, we'll hold it in another place. This is not for profit. This is not for money. Folks come in here because they're top participants. So to give you a flavor, if you look at sports, because we've had this summertime, we've had the tennis, Wimbledon recently, and the cricket is going on. So if you look at the winners for sports, I actually have 2 Olympians who are ambassadors. So several, I actually have a 2-time gold medalist Olympian on the panel of judges, Denise Lewis, OBE. I have Nick Ogden, who founded WorldPay and now Clearbank, on the panel of judges. And the winners have been, so for last year, we had 7-time world champion Ronnie O'Sullivan, to give you an idea. Before that, it was Adolfo Cambiaso, who's the world #1 professional polo player for about 25 years, 10-goal handicap, and so on. So Chris Gale, we talked to cricket. Everybody knows Chris Gale. Chris Gale was a winner. All these people attend. If they can't attend, somebody from the family attends. Wow. Otherwise, these are, and on the business front, so there are 15 categories of awards. And so there's obviously innovative technology and all sorts of things. So they cover a wide spectrum. And as I said, winners have come from 37 countries. CNBC has been a partner, to give you a flavor. And so they've had coverage in over 83 odd countries. It's a global brand, nothing like it. And people want to participate because it's not about money. It's about making sure people who have been successful or on the path to success get recognized.
I think I'm blown away by that introduction.
Thank you.
And I know there's much more behind the scenes. We've had a conversation earlier. I know our viewers and listeners, though, would probably be out there blown away like I am and just thinking, how does this gentleman fit all of these things in? Because it's not easy to juggle these things. There are many, many things in life that we have to go through in order to achieve what we set out to achieve, big or small.
Sure.
Direct for us, but also direct for people like our family. How do you fit it all in? What's the secret of achieving the time balance? How do you do that?
I think it's very simple. Firstly, we're all enamored by what we see around us. So we see successful people all around us. It's good to be inspired, but you're walking your own journey. So most people, what they tend to do is looking over their shoulder what somebody else is doing, how successful somebody else is. Feel the envy, they feel the pain, but they're not focusing on their journey. So the simple mantra is go on your path, be focused, get up early.
Okay.
Okay. Have a plan for the day, whatever it might be. Even if you're just playing a round of golf, you want to play it well. So keep focused. Focus is important. Keeping your journey vision. Have a plan, a 5-year plan for yourself. Like any other plan, you got to have alternatives, and all plans don't succeed. So where is that plan B? So I've got a vision for what I'm going to be doing next. Some of it may come to fruition, not all of it, but I'll get somewhere. And there's everybody trying to go through the same door.
Of course.
And it's not getting any wider. You sometimes have to hustle your way through. Once you get through, keep on that path, and you'll find, meet people, learn from your mistakes, don't repeat them. I make mistakes every day. Try and not repeat them, and you'll find you'll get somewhere. And that somewhere will be your success story, and you'll find that you'll get there, and people will ask me the same, and then the same sort of question as you're asking me today.
Sure. Right now, so you mentioned about the journey and the giving of this award, and you're part of that. But is there something right now? What is your role right now? What takes up the majority of your time today?
Yeah. So firstly, I've as I said, I've sat on several boards. I've just been approved by the regulators here to join a wealth board. I am about to help other entities as a co-founder and joining a board in Mauritius. And there are entities talking to me from different markets. One is from Southeast Asia, wanting to come here. It's a global name, but wanting to make an entry from the UK and set up a entity here. I'm trying to set up a fund, as I've been a global CEO, so that is already in the making. It's gone to the regulators for approval, so it should come to light in the next couple of months. And we'll talk more about it, hopefully, if we meet again. And there is, I believe, a dire need for an SME bank in the UK. And I've come pretty close to setting up a bank in the past, and I'm pretty certain I will set it up in due course in the near term.
So the small and medium enterprise businesses out there.
That's right.
You're saying that there's a gap in the market.
Yes.
For a bank just for those people.
Exactly. So there are about, just to give you a flavor, there are about close to 250 entities that are set up, call it a digital bank, a neobank. And here is a need of people, particularly female entrepreneurs, where there's a niche there. I've launched these businesses internationally. These SMEs need the money. And so you need to have an entity that is looking, and my experience on credit risk tells me that people generally are good. If you aid them, help them, hold their hand,
yes,
they will return your money. So there's an element of risk you got to take. And people are finding it difficult to get monies from banks these days. Your friendly banker is no longer visible. So
why is that?
Because I think they've sort of, firstly, it's costly to run branches. So we know of a certain bank that is that got approvals a few years ago and has got high street presence, but they're struggling, some of these entities. So unless you're a household name like some of these big names, like I've worked for, some of these banks are struggling. So you need an entity that does not necessarily need a lot of brick and mortar, but you do need people you can speak with. You need some connectivity, and that's what is missing these days. And I think that moment of truth. A service is an intangible, if you know what I mean.
Yes.
You tangibilize it by offering a proposition or product which people can feel, and you yourself are there on at that point of sale, if you will. But that is missing these days. So people need that little bit of a touch, that handshake, if you will, is still important. And that is missing for a lot of people, that connection.
Are you suggesting that niche that is missing needs to be filled by some kind of disruptor banking entity?
Oh, 100%, 100%.
And that's what you're looking at.
That's
right
what
now.
I'm looking to do. It's when you take people along with you, they are successful and you're successful. So and that's what the SMEs need today. And I think that is missing, and that's what is something that is going to be done. It's no secret. People know about this. It's about the execution. So I'm not afraid of other people picking up this idea, because the idea has been there. But
Sure.
nobody's grappling with it. It's about grasping the nettle, as they say.
I mean, you have tens of years of experience to know what is right and what's needed. And my question that's coming from this is about the problem in the UK and I guess Europe and probably around the world today after the pandemic is about people, teams, and actually working either from home or from a branch, from an office. You've, I guess, managed or had tens of thousands of teams.
That's right.
Could you give our viewers and listeners today a little bit of insight in the management of those and what actually you think are some solutions to help businesses today with the management of the teams?
Oh, that's a very good question, actually. People have different leadership styles. You can be autocratic, authoritative. That's one style. My style has always been very collaborative. I work with people, and many of them have been better than me. So don't be afraid to hire people who are better than you, smarter than you. And when you surround yourself with good people, things get done. Sure. Listen to people. Being a good listener is important. If somebody gives you a good idea, no idea is bad. Don't just throw it out, and work on it. So the whole mantra is, and I've had teams working from different countries, different locations, be in touch with people. So you have a dashboard. When you have a dashboard, you look at it every day. And when you look at it every day, you'll see the movement. Whatever is important. Sometimes it can be sales numbers, sometimes it can be cost, sometimes it can be attrition of people. How do you cut that down? So when you're interacting with people and dealing with people and you're selling to people, whatever it is, it's about business. People are the most important. So teams, teamwork, motivation, celebrating small wins is important. It's not always the big wins that matter, because the small things, keeping whiteboards, putting things down, for that particular individual, that win is important. Celebrating, recognizing is critical. And as I said, success can be had for anybody running, your listeners, your viewers, anybody who's running a business or in a workplace. If you listen to people, get along well with people, you will be successful, no doubt about it. And that's what happens everywhere. We know there's a political sort of selection going on for the new prime minister. May the best candidate win. But at the end of the day, somebody who will endear not only to the members of parliament, but to the members of that party will emerge as the winner. See what I mean? There's a larger population out there who's going to decide ultimately, yes, sure, the members of the Conservative Party. But what I'm trying to say is, it's all about people.
And I know, because we had a conversation earlier, you have a passion. And it'd be very remiss of me to not talk about the passion, especially when it's staring me in the face. And I myself like clothes. Can you talk us through the selection of your ties? Because I know that some people out there will say, what's this got to do with business? But we know that in specific decision making, having the attire, looking the part is actually quite important. It's your brand. And I know that our viewers and listeners talk to us on a regular basis about branding. Can you tell us about your ties?
Well, thank you for noticing, firstly. I think it's all about, I'll step back if you don't mind. I'll come to the tie and talk about ties briefly. It's about building a personal brand. All of us, some are taller than us, some are bigger than us, but we are individuals. So building a personal brand is important. And so I'm always in a suit normally, or at least in a jacket 100%. And now that is something I believe in. The word perception goes a bit beyond. So people, it's not only about coming to your talk to you today. But if you see me sweltering outside, it's pretty hot, and I've lived in hotter countries.
Sure.
So at the end of the day, create your personal brand, dress the way you want to feel, but dress appropriately, if you know what I mean.
Yes.
And if you're going to an occasion where you need to be dressed smartly, you got to be. Secondly, perception goes a bit beyond, as I was alluding to. Carry it through. People are watching you all the while, even when you think they're not. Mm-hmm. So it's not about showing to people. It's you look at that mirror, that person looks back at you. He or she, if you're a lady listening and watching, has to say the same thing. This person is a continuous same mantra, same person all the while. You don't just say things, you got to mean them, if you know what I mean. And so coming back to the ties, yes, I don't like to repeat a tie if I can. This is a patchwork where we won't mention the brand, but it's a patchwork of silk strewn together to bring this tie. And ties come in pleats. For those who don't know, they can be horizontal pleats, they can be vertical pleats. And your pocket square should not normally be the same make, if necessarily. So this is a different one. So that depends where you want the focus to be.
Of course.
So the focus is your tie. This is just there to sort of give it company, but that's the focus. So the tie is an important part because suits, for men at least, can be mundane, the usual gray, brown, and some pinstripes if you want to be a little more exotic. But the tie can have you stand out. So it's not uncommon if I go to an event of 500 people, the tie should stand out is what I'm saying. People come and see it, and that's critical. And they come from some very well-known names, but at the end of the day, it's the wearer that matters. So I'm pretty certain all your viewers and listeners, when they wear a good tie, it makes them stand out.
When did the passion come for looking the part? And I say looking the part because I don't know how else to describe a person who puts up a serious consideration about what they look like. I certainly have that when I come out for the day's work and the day's business. I am trying to dress appropriately for my audience, but also for myself. When did that?
I think since I was very young.
Really?
I was a tailor's nightmare. So I grew up in India where you could walk up to a tailor and get things altered. I still have a tailor. I buy things off the rack.
Okay.
But I do need a little bit of alterations. Do I have a tailor? So it's something in my father's house. I used to be even on a Sunday, perhaps in a suit. That's the way we were meant to sort of look. And so I grew up trying to look good, and that was sort of, or at least dressing well. But coming back to ties, I remember going to the Champs-Élysées in France on a shoestring budget from India and looking at the show windows at the Ferragamo's and Hermes ties. And at that time, I couldn't afford them. And today there are 20, 25 of them sitting in the closet. I don't wear them. If you know what I mean, I wear better ties, I believe. So what I'm trying to say is it's also a case when I didn't have all the money I needed, and I looked at the show window. So to sort of tell you, in life, you can actually be, if I might add, get whatever you want in life, provided you have the passion to get it, provided you want it badly, provided you go about doing it single-mindedly and be a good human being and sort of take people along with you. So it's not only about the tie. Thank you for checking and asking me about that. It's about thinking clearly the way you want to be, and you can get anywhere you want to be and get the tie you want.
Wow. That I didn't know that was going to, for you to articulate the way you've just articulated. For me, and we are trying to put this podcast on for exactly that. It has nothing to do with the tie, as we spoke about earlier. Of course, it's a consideration. But how deep does that go back for those times when you looked through those windows, knowing that one day, if you worked smart enough and hard enough and hustled and presented, then you were going to go back. The story is amazing. And for our listeners and viewers out there, it's been another sensational podcast. I would like to just ask you again, is there anything that you've missed? Is there anything, there's hundreds of things I know because we spoke earlier, but is there anything that you'd like to either retouch on or actually something new that you've missed or you'd like to speak about?
Well, thank you. I can think of, I've always desired, we've all read some books, and I've always desired to write a book.
Wow.
I've been inspired by several people I've worked with, met, so I've sort of written just about a few pages yet, but it's in the making. And it'll probably talk of mantras, if I might say, or you might say ideas that I believe in, what I've been inspired by people and I've seen. So for instance, I was talking perception earlier.
Sure.
It's a continuum. Think of a fly on the wall always watching you. So you sort of carry that through. So I've seen, and then I've been sort of helped by people over the years. We all need support.
Always.
We always need some good friends around us. So I've had some good people being there for me. And I've gone to meetings where they didn't know it was an important meeting. And the person who's sort of meeting with you has already been spoken to, just as a friend. So those sort of people inspire you. So I'm going to sort of bring that together, which is not a business book. It's about life, which obviously it helps people in business. It helps people in jobs. It helps people just to see things the way they should, possibly. Not through my eyes only, but through the eyes of many others who've sort of struggled, persevered, been successful, and indeed we can learn a thing or two. The process of learning is never ending. So that's what the book should hopefully someday see light, and we'll give you a copy.
I'd be delighted, and we definitely would be the first people that would buy it. In terms of goal setting, I'm fascinated of this area of life, and in business it can be transformational. We have a saying, my business partner and I, about always wanting to have transformational relationships, never transactional relationships, because if you get into transactional relationships, they can come and go so very quickly. I'm fascinated in your goal setting, objective setting in life. Has that been very formal for you, or have you just had it in your brain and you knew that what you wanted to achieve and you worked towards that? Can you just give us a bit of insight into that?
That's a good question again. I think in life, things are fluid. All of us face challenges. It's how you transform those challenges, treat them as opportunities. So when you have a problem, there are those that get bogged down and keep thinking of the problem. I try and look for the solution. And when you think clearly and don't get bogged down, solutions do emerge. And when you have a few ideas bouncing around, one of them will probably succeed. And I face those challenges every day. So to answer your question, goal setting is critical, but it can't be rigid. Okay. No plan is made without having alternatives.
Okay.
So the whole idea of plan setting or planning is you have a plan. So you start with an objective, then you create a set of plans, how you'll get and to sort of making that plan succeed. But what happens in the interim if something is not working out? So each plan will have some alternatives. So you've got to be flexible. The mindset cannot be such that if something is not succeeding or is not moving according to plan, most people tend to sort of bog themselves down that, hang on, this is not working for me, this is not going to work. You've got to persevere and think of those alternatives. And sometimes those alternatives may be totally different from what you set out for. If you know what I mean.
Yes.
I mentioned lighting and I mentioned launching Xerox, but then I've been a banker or financial services person. So those are things that will come to you. But keep on that path. Be clear and don't get sort of perturbed by what somebody else's success is. I alluded to the fact it's your journey, your time, and that moment is lost if you lose it. So every minute is important. That doesn't mean you've got to sort of work yourself to death. Money is a means, not an end. So if you think of it that way, and think, look, I need sufficient amount, but I don't have to get mad at sort of trying to earn as much, because sitting in a bank's coffers otherwise. And that's what I meant. So you sort of go about that path, clear thinking, set some goals. Without any goals, you're sort of a rudderless ship. That's not going to be helpful in the deep seas there. So you got to have some plans, some goals, but be prepared to be flexible and sort of think, hang on, if this is not working, something else will. I'm pretty certain success will be there.
Wow. What a fascinating interview. And I'm so pleased that you stopped by today to come in to see us.
My pleasure indeed.
Absolutely fantastic. Thank you so much. British Business Podcast listeners and viewers, until next time.